For most wealthy donors, the problem is not lack of generosity. It's an inefficient approach to giving. You write checks to your favorite charities each year, you take a tax deduction for whatever you donated, and then you do it all over again the following year. A lot of high net worth families simply are not aware that there's a straightforward tool that can help you give more, potentially pay less in taxes, and maintain more control over your charitable dollars over time. That tool is called a donor advised fund, or DAF for short. If you're new here, I'm Dave Wagner. I'm a CFA, CPA, and CFP, and I've worked with families on philanthropic planning for nearly 2 decades. And for those of you who are not new, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to walk you through what a donor advised fund is, how it works, and why it can be a powerful tool for families who want to give strategically while potentially reducing their tax burden. Let's start with what a donor advised fund actually is. The easiest way to think about a donor advised fund is as a charitable investment account. You make an irrevocable contribution to the fund, meaning once the assets go in, they're committed to the charity. In exchange, you receive an immediate tax deduction for the full fair market value of what you just contributed, subject to the applicable IRS limits. Once inside the donor advised fund, the assets can be invested. Any growth that occurs inside the fund is generally tax-free, which creates a potential for your charitable dollars to grow over time. From there, you can recommend grants to qualified charities on your own timeline. You're not required to give everything away immediately or even donate a minimum amount each year. In many ways, a donor advised fund can feel like creating your own private charitable foundation. Far less complexity, considerably lower cost, and significantly less administrative burden. Now that we have covered what donor advised funds are, here are a few reasons why writing checks directly to charities may not be your best option. When you write checks each year, you still get a tax deduction, but you may be missing bigger planning opportunities. If you're donating cash, you could be leaving money on the table compared to donating appreciated assets. You're also making one-year decisions instead of thinking strategically about multi-year giving. And often, charitable giving is not being coordinated with the rest of your financial plan, including taxes, investments, and estate planning. One of the most powerful features of donor advised funds is the ability to donate appreciated assets. Let me walk you through a simple hypothetical example. Imagine someone who bought stock years ago for $50,000. Over time, that stock has grown and is now worth $250,000. If they sell the stock in order to donate cash, they'll owe capital gains tax on the $200,000 gain. At current rates, and depending on state residency, that could add up to over $65,000 in taxes. Instead, one approach they might consider is donating the stock directly to a donor advised fund. By doing that, they can avoid paying capital gains taxes on the donated shares, and they may receive a tax deduction for the full $250,000 fair market value. And the charity ultimately benefits because more dollars go to charitable causes rather than to taxes. This leads to the 2 key tax benefits that families often consider when evaluating a donor advised fund. First is the immediate tax deduction in the year of contribution. This can be particularly valuable in high income years as it may help offset things like large bonuses, stock option exercises, or proceeds from selling a business. The second benefit is avoiding capital gains tax on appreciated assets. You can avoid paying tax on the appreciation, which means more of your wealth can ultimately support the causes you care about. This can be especially impactful when working with highly appreciated stock. Before we get into how this might work in practice, I want to briefly mention something. At Tidecrest, we work with families who have accumulated substantial assets, and philanthropic planning is often an important part of their overall wealth management strategy. We coordinate directly with the client's CPA to explore tactics like donor advised funds and help integrate charitable giving into their broader tax and estate planning picture. If you want to explore ways to give more strategically while potentially reducing your tax burden, there's a link in the description to learn more about how we work with families. Now, let's talk about how someone might use a donor advised fund in practice. Imagine a corporate executive who's about to receive a significant bonus. They know this will be a high income year, and they also know they want to be an active philanthropist over the next several years. One approach they might consider is contributing a larger amount to a donor advised fund during this high income year. By doing so, they can take the full tax deduction now when it may be most valuable to offset income tax at elevated rates. Inside the donor advised fund, the assets can be invested and potentially grow tax-free. Over the next several years, they can recommend grants to the charities they care about, even though the tax deduction already occurred. This type of bunching strategy can sometimes be more tax efficient than donating smaller amounts every year. This may become even more relevant in 2026 when some of the tax laws related to charitable giving are expected to change. It also gives them flexibility to adjust which charities receive funds over time as their priorities evolve. So what actually happens inside a donor advised fund? Once you contribute assets, those funds can be invested in a range of options depending on the sponsor. Growth inside the donor advised fund is generally tax-free, which over time may allow you to grant more to charity than you originally contributed. You can recommend grants on your own timeline, and there's no requirement to distribute everything immediately or even an annual minimum, which is required by some other strategies. Some families even use donor advised funds as part of a multi-generational giving strategy involving children or grandchildren in charitable decisions over time. There are several specific situations where a donor advised fund might make sense to explore. This can include situations we've already discussed, such as high income years where additional deductions may be helpful and situations where you have highly appreciated assets. But donor advised funds can also be useful when you want to simplify charitable record keeping, not yet sure which charities you want to support, you want to involve your family in the giving decisions, if you're thinking about making a multi-year charitable commitment, or if you have plans to make a large single donation in a future year. For example, we've seen clients accumulate funds in a donor advised fund over many years and then donate a large sum to their alma mater to endow a professorship or support a campus expansion. That said, there are a few things to understand before opening a donor advised fund. Contributions are irrevocable, meaning you cannot get the money back. You recommend the grants, but technically the donor advised fund sponsor has final approval. Don't worry though, in practice, nearly all recommendations to qualified charities are approved by DAF sponsors. Some sponsor organizations have minimums to open a donor advised fund, and different companies will inevitably have a range of fee structures and available investment options. As you can see, we covered a lot about donor advised funds, but there's one main takeaway I want you to remember. If you are charitably inclined and you have appreciated assets, a donor advised fund can be a powerful tool that may help you give more to the causes you care about, while potentially reducing your tax burden in more than one way. Of course, a DAF is not right for everyone, and there are nuances based on your specific situation that must be considered prior to utilizing one. But in my 2 decades in working with high net worth families, I've found those who use donor advised funds often feel like they're getting more impact from their charitable dollars. If you're watching this and thinking, I give to charity every year, but I've never really thought about it strategically, then you may benefit from exploring approaches like this. At our firm, we coordinate charitable giving strategies directly with your CPA to help you think about giving in a more integrated way. If you'd like to learn more about how we approach this or explore whether strategies like a donor advised fund might make sense for you, click the first link in the description to schedule a conversation. If you found this valuable, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.